The coffee shop at midnight. Every night at exactly 12 a.m., a small coffee shop in Seattle opened its doors for the people who couldn't sleep. It was called Moonlight Café. Ethan Carter, a 30-year-old photographer, had been visiting the cafe every night for almost a year. He always sat beside the window. He always ordered the same thing, one black coffee, and he never spoke to anyone. Until one stormy night, a young woman suddenly rushed through the door. Her coat was soaked, her hair was wet, and she was holding a broken camera in her hands. She looked around the nearly empty cafe. Only one seat was available, the seat across from Ethan. "Can I sit here?" Ethan looked up. Of course. She sat down and placed the broken camera on the table. Ethan noticed it immediately. "You're a photographer?" She smiled. "I was." "What happened?" "Rain." Ethan laughed. "That's a terrible enemy for a photographer." She laughed too. Her name was Sophie Miller. She was a travel photographer who had just returned from a year-long journey across Europe. That night they talked until the cafe closed. Before leaving, Sophie looked at Ethan. "You come here every night?" "Almost." "Why?" Ethan looked through the window. "Because midnight is the only time the city becomes quiet enough to hear your own thoughts." Sophie smiled. "I think I'll come back tomorrow." She did, and the next night, and the night after that. Soon, midnight became their time. They talked about everything, their childhoods, their dreams, their fears, the places they wanted to see. Ethan showed Sophie photographs he had never shown anyone. Sophie showed Ethan the pictures she had taken around the world. One night, Sophie asked, "Why don't you travel anymore?" Ethan became quiet. "Because the person I wanted to travel with isn't here anymore." Sophie didn't ask another question. She simply reached across the table and held his hand. Sometimes love begins with a confession. Sometimes it begins with silence. For them, it began with understanding. Months passed. Ethan and Sophie became inseparable. They explored Seattle together, watched sunsets by the water, took photographs in empty streets, danced in the rain, and every night at midnight they returned to Moonlight Café. But one evening, Sophie received a phone call. A famous photography magazine offered her a contract. She would have to travel around the world for 2 years. It was everything she had dreamed of, but she didn't smile. When she told Ethan, he simply said, "You should go." Sophie looked at him. "That's all you can say?" "What else can I say?" "You could ask me to stay." Ethan looked down. "I love you too much to become the reason you give up your dream." Sophie whispered, "And what about us?" Ethan smiled sadly. "If it's real, it will survive the distance." The next night was their final night together. At midnight, Sophie placed a small wooden box on the table. "Open it." Inside was a photograph. It showed Ethan sitting alone at the cafe window on the first night they met. On the back, Sophie had written, "I thought I was photographing a stranger. I didn't know I was photographing my future." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. He reached into his pocket. Inside was a tiny silver key. Sophie looked confused. "The key to what?" Ethan smiled coquishly. "The key to the apartment across the street from this cafe. I rented it yesterday." "Why?" "Because when you come back, you'll have somewhere to come home to." Sophie couldn't stop crying. She hugged him tightly. "I don't know when I'll be back." Ethan whispered, "I'll be here at midnight." 2 years passed. Ethan never stopped visiting Moonlight Café. Every night at midnight, he sat beside the same window, the same table, the same black coffee. Until one rainy night, the cafe door opened. Ethan looked up. His heart stopped. Sophie stood there, holding her old camera. She smiled. "Is this seat taken?" Ethan stood up. "Never." She walked toward him. He held her tightly. "I told you I'd be here." Sophie whispered, "I know. Why did you come back?" She looked into his eyes. "Because I traveled around the world, and somehow every road still led me back to you." Ethan smiled. Then he kissed her beneath the warm cafe lights. Outside, the rain continued falling, but neither of them cared. Because sometimes you don't find love in the perfect place. You find it at the exact moment you need someone to stay. And sometimes the person who leaves isn't saying goodbye. They're simply finding their way back home. The end.